Norm Hodson from Dialogue to come up and introduce Bob Rennie, today's speaker. So Norm, if I could ask you to come up.
Thanks, Don. Well, Bob, wherever you are, it's nice to have lunch together again. Compliments of UDI. Although, I guess since we're a sponsor, maybe we actually paid for your lunch. Normally, in doing this introduction of Bob, I always try and look for a little bit of smut from the previous year that I can use to roast him a bit. And, you know, he's really gotten quite clean. I have to tell you, I've been having trouble finding material. His office sent over a bio, and I've never had a bio for Bob before. I've always, I don't know, I guess I just never bothered to inquire, other than I knew he was born on the East Side long ago. But the bio was kind of interesting because he's received some accolades in the past year, and I thought you might be interested in hearing about these. For example, Carol Taylor and SFU awarded Bob the 2012 Chancellor's Distinguished Service Award for his role in the redevelopment of Woodwards. He helped raise some $30 million to move the SFU School of Contemporary Arts to that facility. Secondly, he's currently sitting on the board of Street to Home, an organization that ensures that the homeless in Vancouver have access to safe, decent, and affordable housing and services. And thirdly, just last month, Rich Coleman appointed Bob to the BC Housing Management Commission Board, which is charged with providing oversight to BC Housing to meet government priorities and to build on the provincial housing strategy known as Housing Matters BC. In this room, we know Bob obviously as a Vancouverite, marketer extraordinaire, collector, philanthropist, societal broker, and I'm going to add now a new one, bridge builder. And I say bridge building because I think if I am reading correctly some of the discussions I had with Bob the other day, he's really doing some intriguing work in building gaps in this community. Example, his own gallery in the Wing Sang building is his way of bringing both economy and culture to Chinatown, Gastown, and the downtown East Side. And it's really interesting that for the next 4 summers, he's made arrangements for the Royal BC Museum to occupy the gallery. And it's, you know, not downtown, not on a cushy waterfront somewhere, but in an edgier part of town where some 20,000 people are going to visit the facility each summer. So this is really cultural bridging. Bob also believes that we should live in more diversified neighborhoods and communities, and this is, I think, his sort of contribution in terms of social bridging. He recognizes that affordable home ownership doesn't rest solely with the City of Vancouver, that it should be looked at regionally, and this is community bridging. And finally, Bob will probably tell us about all the wealth that's flowing into this community on a daily basis, and that we need to leverage that opportunity in our residential delivery, and this is economic bridging. So Bob, bridge builder extraordinaire, we look forward to your talk, and we hope with your title concerning bubbles. By the way, I was going to bring a prop because Bob likes props, and I thought of one of those bubble blowing devices, but my grandson spilled it all over, so I didn't have that. But the bubble, we hope, is of the champagne variety and not the type that burst. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Bob Rennie.
So, Maureen, you can come up here. You know, the song's actually for Maureen, and what I wanted to do, because I think this is Maureen's last AGM, and depending on what I say today, it may be my last AGM too. But I think what Maureen's been to me, I got to say personally, is she's allowed me to grow up in front of you and in front of the UDI. But I think what Maureen's been very carefully, and probably most of the room doesn't realize, is she's been our mother, and I think she has protected us from what we want, and she's given us what we need, and I just think we should give Maureen a great standing round of applause because she's just been amazing for our industry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There are flowers somewhere, but I don't know where they are. Okay, thank you. Do you want to say anything? You want to say anything? You should.
Oh my goodness. Oh, these are beautiful. I can't thank all of you enough. As I said earlier, the 30 years has been an incredible journey for me. Mostly it's about the people, and I've had the honor and privilege of working in this industry. You know, whenever you go to a public hearing and things get tough, you know that at least one person's out there is rooting for you all the time. Thanks all so very much. Thank you.
Okay, now just let me get this so I can turn pages. First of all, thank you very much for having me back. I think this is my 10th year. But I never know where to start or why I actually do this, and there really just isn't any one answer. However, I do believe that beyond the obvious privilege of being asked to speak each year, that my annual talk at the UDI is somewhere between 100 or so hours of research and writing, some sort of public therapy, and breaking in a new act, as you saw last year. In the Breaking in a New Act department, what I'd like to do is maybe get some politics out of the way nice and early, because that's what you're expecting. But what I see going on provincially, it's very confusing to me. My political education is derived largely from a table at the Four Seasons restaurant. And as I walk in each day, everybody wants to explain to me the lie of the land, the state of the world, the odds, the polls, the trends, but most importantly, their own political views. 2 weeks ago, a very prominent business leader grabs me and says, "Bob, how do you win a horse race?" And he repeats it again, "Bob, how do you win a horse race?" And I managed to sort of get 2 words in, I, starting to say, I don't know. And he's almost yelling at me at this point, and he's telling me he's been around a lot longer than me, and how do you win at a horse race? So that little voice inside of me is going, I'll go with dementia for $50, Alex. Instead, I go with, I don't know, don't bet on your favorite color, and he says, you bet on every horse. So as I'm walking away, I sort of mumble to him and to myself as I gain my composure that the only win that you have there is to say that you won. And I think there lies the problem right now, is seriously when my son's soccer team was having a bad game or the team was in trouble, very seldom did I ever go just cheer for the other team so that when I went for beer, I could say that I predicted this game. So whether it's politicians or housing, both topics really need the intellect of this room. Politicians require constructive solutions. Housing requires constructive solutions, not sound bites. So I tend to run my life, this is the public therapy part, I tend to run my life with, I would rather be wrong for a day and right for a lifetime with conviction, rather than what I see going on a lot out there with sound bites, is a lot of sound bites and blogs would rather be right for the day and wrong for a lifetime. And a little like the Olympic Village, because I got to get that in, it just needed somebody to stay on message. So now that we have sold 516 of the 737 condominiums, there's only 222 to go. I have everybody telling me that they never doubted it. Bob, it's on the water. Of course it would work. And my little voice inside my head is going, where the fuck were you when I needed you? And more important is, by the way, the desperate for attention new guy from Colliers, this isn't directed at you. I wouldn't do that. With the Olympic, it's not a hobby. With the Olympic Village, Ernst & Young agreed that we could accelerate the phasing of Canada House on the water. That we're probably 6 months ahead of schedule. We launched Canada House, 40 homes on the water. Arthur Erickson inspired. 32 of the 40 have sold over the last 10 weeks. 32 sales, approximately $78 million in sales, breaking $1,100 per square foot. If you haven't been down to the village, it's a piece of Vancouver real estate history. I suggest you go down to Terra Breads, grab a coffee, and walk around, and you'll know why you never doubted it. Seriously, my company's job was to protect the asset. All of us at Rennie considered our newly named village on False Creek quite possibly to be the most watched and quite possibly career-making or career-breaking assignment of our company's history. We took a huge marketing risk that we can now talk about. I went out to the media without permission from Ernst & Young, the manager, without permission from the lender, the City of Vancouver, and our kickoff campaign was, "It's a ghost town." There was no focus group needed for that one, and we purposely called the village a ghost town, deliberately placing a cloud over the village, a cloud that we thought we could remove, allowing the consumer, allowing the media, and allowing this room to measure the success of the village by counting the coffee cups littering the plaza, by tracking the population of the village, and taking the spotlight off of the politics and off of the revenue. This allowed us to do our job. The asset was protected, revenue was protected, and the Vancouver taxpayer is protected. So every year there's also a brand risk associated with the title of my UDI talk, as Norm went down that path, and this year was no different. This year was, should we be influenced by David Baxter? For those of you that don't know David, he's a demographer, founder of Urban Futures. David is probably the smartest person I know. David told me only 2 weeks ago at Campagnolo's on dinner, and I tell you Campagnolo's so I can get free food. He said, "Bob, when you're up there, just tell them that they should be begging the developers to build." Or do we go with the Globe and Mail's April 14th story quoting an Arizona accountant, blogger, Ben Jones, warning us violently, in print, violently, that Vancouver and Toronto are a housing bubble that just hasn't burst yet, paralleling us to his state? Ben can be reached at speakerswithoutfacts.com/irresponsible. We're going to stick with today's title, What If It's Not a Bubble? Today, I want to really look at the baby boomer and how this 48 to 66-year-old has changed their buying habits forever. I'll continue to break out baby boomers, banks, and builders into the old economy pre-September 2008, when we were all a little unconscious, and the new economy post-September 2009, where being unconscious is not an option. I believe that the leaner, meaner baby boomer is the game changer today. When it comes to the baby boomer, I wasn't sure whether to go with their leaner, meaner, or we should go with they are definitely lumpier and grumpier. And you know them. Along with the baby boomer, we should try to understand the impact of foreign economies, immigration, cultural trends, affordability, first-time buyers, and aging populations, and their impact on Greater Vancouver's real estate market. Don, can I get a glass of water? Sorry. No, thank you so much. Thank you. Peter Wall brought it to me last year. Just a reminder, Peter. Yeah. You are. You are, sir. I told you last year, and worth repeating, as a private citizen, think property taxes, think health care, and as a developer, you should think wider doorways, more storage space, because in years 2009 through 2018 in British Columbia, we're going to see the 55 to 64-year-old population increase by 38%, while we watch 65 to 74-year-olds increase in population by 56%, and that workforce tax-paying, baby-making generation of 35 to 54-year-olds will only grow by 4.6%. I joked with CMHC's board a couple years ago that Vancouver never went up on fundamentals, so why would we go down on fundamentals? However, our market really does have fundamentals, but our fundamentals cannot be captured in a 90-second elevator conversation, at the water cooler, or in a soundbite, and especially not on a blog or a 140-character tweet. I do have a huge concern over what Tracy McTavish, the president of my company refers to as your keyboard courage. We've all seen it, referring to what is becoming a dangerously and apparently acceptable practice, which is negative market commentary that is nothing but speculation. Think Arizona Ben. Speculation made by spineless, signatureless individuals on a blog that in most cases has less than 500 followers. Then the next thing you know, the mainstream media pick up on the negative fact, and all of a sudden it's breaking news, and our industry spends the next 6 months attempting to dispel the rumors and sound bites. Think Olympic Village. Only 2 weeks ago, CBC called and wanted an on-camera interview on the topic of the Mercedes-Benz site at Broadway and Hemlock, selling for a reported $30 million. The story had legs, all because of a soundbite from a prominent developer that was crying foul play that the money from mainland China was upsetting our market. This prominent developer, that can't be named, that wasn't named, actually does benefit from China in their own condo sales. That was a test that if I know he benefits from China, then how come I don't know his name? I'm just seeing if you're following. Well, I do, and possibly everyone in this room does benefit from heavy scrutinized mainland China sales. The reason that a site like Mercedes-Benz sold well over the 23 to 24 million that the locals would pay is simple. The mainland China buyer saw a long-term hold and a commercial value beyond sort of the instant condo development gratification that I like. 15 minutes after CBC and I spoke, they killed the story as just sour grapes. The wealth is not restricted to housing. I believe that there's a cultural shift happening that we're not prepared for, and it's only just started. An unnamed journalist over at the Globe emailed me while I was writing today's talk a couple of weeks ago, writing me for a comment towards a story on the decline in buyers of mainland China that one realtor was attributing to bad economic conditions in China and the tightening of money flow. I don't think I should be using journalists' names as there's media in the room. So my response to Francis Beulah was, and while we're at it, the CBC reporter was Kirk Williams and the developer. Call me. But let's be very careful. When money is allowed to flow, it flows, and when money isn't allowed to flow, it really flows. As China's growth slows down to 7%, that unprecedented wealth accumulation now has time to diversify. When it comes to those high-end China-focused private school neighborhoods, maybe, just maybe, it's time for those neighborhoods to catch their breath, and I'll prove it out in numbers shortly. We believe that there are 4 factors influencing those markets. 1, the listings are up as locals want to cash out, think baby boomer. 2, realtors taking listings priced to the highest crazy sale, that anomaly, think commission. 3, currently there are less buyers, and this is compounded further by the 4th, the sense of urgency is gone. Last week there were 553 listings west of Main Street over 2.5 million. 12 months ago there were 288. And when an overpriced listing that is priced higher than the last market anomaly sells for less, is that really a market correction? Here again, sound bites are much more provocative than the facts. Still today, if a listing is priced right on the right street, it has multiple offers within 4 or 5 days. I'm living in my daughter's home while my home's being remodeled, and I'm going to a new Starbucks in the morning, and a fellow stopped me 2 days ago and was questioning how the market has stopped on the west side, and he just put his home for sale at Granville and Nanton. And I gave him some of the statistics I have here of the listings at 553 versus the 288, and homes over 2.5 million. He says, well, mine's at 2.4, and I'm worried. And I said, how long have you had it on? He goes, oh, we have 2 offers, and it's been on 2 weeks. So we're just so conditioned that it's going to happen so fast, and these are conversations that you really couldn't have anywhere in the United States of America. But we're just conditioned that it is nonstop. But I believe that the buyer from mainland China is becoming a lot more sophisticated, and similar to the Hong Kong buyer of the 90s. Once the mainland China buyer goes to dim sum 4 times, the learning curve is breathtakingly fast, and they begin to regionalize, rationalize, and start to criticize the same as the locals do. may be equal to this room taking 4 WestJet flights to Palm Springs or Phoenix, just like dim sum, 4 flights and you're an expert. Watch the anomalies and crazy sales become far less frequent than the initial wave. Think back to previous generations. When did your Italian, German, Croatian, and Jewish grandparents first upset the market? There is a difference this time that separates the conversations around mainland Chinese buyers from previous generations that really should be addressed. And different from previous generations, I believe, is supply, the iPhone, Facebook, and our inability to absorb change. When it comes to supply, Vancouver will not create another single-family lot in your lifetime unless you tear down a home on 2 lots. And what other cities can possibly say this? Possibly if you use Manhattan, if you use Paris, if you use San Francisco. And different from previous generations, we communicate using iPhones, Blackberries, Facebook, and Twitter. The voices of earlier generations, your grandparents, were very civil. They were tempered. Maybe a handwritten letter to the newspaper editor or to your city council would be received within a week of protesting. Everything was diffused by mail delivery with previous generations. I think in the same vein, Occupy Wall Street is a whole new way for the 99% to be heard. Occupy Wall Street is the legitimate outrage of why 30 people get multi-million dollar bonuses at the expense of 6,000 workers being laid off. Certainly not our Occupy Vancouver Rainbow Coalition with no focus, with banners like my favorite, condos kill. What I have learned from, seriously, what I have learned from the 99% that as recent as 20 years ago, the 1% in all likelihood influence 40%, even 50% of trends, culture, and the vote. Well, it's a new day with iPhones, Blackberries, Facebook, and Twitter. It's all changed, and yikes, it's one man, one vote, and get used to it. The change can already be seen locally in the power of community groups when it comes to development, actually causing moratoriums. The 1% versus the 99% to me is as big a cultural shift as 9/11. 66% of the 99% are very, very, very smart. I think that we should be listening very carefully to what the 60% are saying, and I think that we should be watching what the 60% are watching, and it's all going to come through in what we decide to develop and build and how it's absorbed in future markets. Also different from previous immigration bulges, there's a reason why we're having difficulty with our ability to absorb change, and that is Greater Vancouver's economic breakdown is very unique because most cities with this much attention from foreign buyers have much, much, much larger populations, better able to absorb the in-migration. Think New York, think London, think urban resort. In 2011, there were 42,450 multi and single family residences, housing registered in the Land Registry Office. In Greater Vancouver, 69% of all the homes purchased were purchased by existing homeowners. That leaves us with 31% being first-time buyers. We have to question how local incomes within the 31% actually purchase real estate in Greater Vancouver and in all of these pre-sales. To get some answers on affordability and ability, we have some very telling buyer stats from Andrew Grant and Dan Turner's PCI success story at Marine Gateway. And the reason I say Andrew and Dan is I really don't know which one signs my paycheck, so I think I should put both. And then I will take you through 2011 sales that help dispel the soundbite that we are the most expensive place on earth. With Marine Gateway, I went out to 414 buyers with a very exhaustive survey. We received an unprecedented 170 responders. That's a 40% response from all the buyers, a little different from political polls that can sway voter opinion with a sampling of 0.00025% of the population. So if you're going to use, and this will all be up, all my stats will be up online after 1 week at Rennie.com or with the UDI. And as you leave today, the office will hand you out a small business card encapsulating most of the important stats from today. But if you're going to use my Marine Gateway findings, be glad we didn't use the group that did the polling for the Wild Rose Party in Alberta, which is the same group the NPA used here in Vancouver, and now you know where I'm going with this, and now doing polling for the Provincial Conservative Party. It is actually difficult to be that consistently wrong. I think that the marketplace needs us to open the vault a bit here and share the consumer data that we obtained from our Marine Gateway survey. 66% of the buyers were from Vancouver, 16% Richmond, and 9% from Burnaby. By gender, 54% men, 46% women. By age, 29% were aged 50 to 70, and 44% were under the age of 40. So as we became very confident of a 95% sellout on opening day, we went out to the media as the database grew to approximately 11,000. The consumer was letting us know that they wanted the entire package. They wanted the theaters, they wanted T&T, they wanted the shops, they wanted Canada Line. 2 weeks out from opening day, we canceled $185,000 in pre-booked marketing and advertising, and we took approximately $750,000 in incentives off the table. The media, they just didn't want another condo story, but a cultural shift, changing trend, affordable home ownership story. That's a story. I positioned Marine Gateway in the media with a narrative something like this. In the 70s and 80s, it was location, location, location. In the 90s through mid-2000s, it was timing, timing, timing. But from here forward, it's transit, transit, transit. I believe that the real Olympic legacy was training us to use public transportation. Well, the week leading up to opening day was crazy. Print, TV, radio ran with the transit headlines. Bill Good had 2 or 3 talk shows highlighting Marine Gateway and transit-oriented developments. In fact, I'm on Bill Good tomorrow to give these stats, because we went on before the opening predicting the success, and now they want the stats. We couldn't release them before today. Our surveys use a 3-point rating scale of not important, important, and very important, and the survey says transit, with 72.5% of Marine Gateway buyers identifying transit as very important. Marine Gateway had this confirmed with 105 sales of 414 with no parking. When we did the capital for Peter, we did approximately 90 homes without parking downtown, and when we did Electric Avenue back in 2006, we had 102 units without parking. But the no parking only works if you have easy or immediate access to transit, or carpooling, and carpooling only works in very dense urban centers. But if we listen carefully to the baby boomer, they may be saying we really only need 1 car, and with the condo, we just walk a lot more. But what they mean to say is it's our golf dues or the second car. If you're over 40, and more so if you're a baby boomer, you consider the cost of fuel, insurance, and maintenance of your car when considering reducing a household from 2 cars to 1 car. If you're under 25, you don't own a car because it's an inconvenience, and you care about the environment. And unlike the 50s, you do not need a car to find out where your friends are. The reality is youth has replaced their dependency on the automobile with their dependency on the iPhone, and unlike their mums and dads, youth does not require a car to get laid. Ask your children. Marine Gateway had a huge responsibility as the density poster child, being the first major development on the Canada Line and the Cambie Corridor, which most likely contributed to the Woodwards type attention. I do remember in late 07, early 08, having lunch with Brent Todderan, our former city planner under Sam Sullivan at the time, and saying it's the poster child for eco-density. There was a huge concern that maybe there could be a little bit of residential in the northwest corner. Well, that was 07, and here we are 5 years later, that the consumer got what they wanted. They want residential next to the Canada Line. But being the poster child for eco-density, the word eco-density doesn't exist anymore. It's gone the way of the disco ball. And now, as the 3 Cambie and Marine corners come before council, the heavy lifting and moving the community towards change has been accomplished by PCI's perseverance, and the consumer, they've spoken as 38% end users and 62% investors. If half of the 62% of investors resell or put family into those condominiums, we'll still see a contribution of 128 homes to our rental stock in Vancouver on transit. And by passive investors. And there's so much criticism about the investor, but I think we have to ask ourselves continually is where would rental rates be and where would supply be if any consequences really come from without this passive investor. Rental is very difficult to pencil out on the most expensive land in Canada. I'm watching the Aquilini's Rogers Arena closely and the conversations with the city. Do they pay $40 million in CACs or just build 500 apartments as pure rental and keep the $40 million to subsidize how rental doesn't work with the high cost of land? But back to the Marine Gateway survey and rental supply, 109 of our 414 buyers were first-time investors. This first-time investor is a real demographic that we really saw show up at about 16% when we did 2300 Kingsway, the old Eldorado hotel site. And it's just that the first-time buyer today that just wanted a home and to one day not pay rent or have a mortgage, well, now our first-time buyer has to understand that unlike his mother and father and unlike his grandparents, Vancouver housing competes with gold, 1% term deposits, and the uncertainty of the stock market. Approximately 70 of our 414 buyers own 2 or more condos, and 53 of the 414 have another pre-sale in the pipeline. So where do deposits come from? 67% came from savings, 11% from a line of credit against another asset, and 15% from parents or grandparents. And to me, the statistic to watch that's going to keep increasing is the money from family. And if you give me a minute, I'll delve further into where exactly that money is being held. And I believe it will change any analysis of the first-time buyer being purely income-based. On opening day at Marine Gateway, Brian Coxford of Global TV asked me if we could find a buyer that was writing an offer. There was 50 people in there writing offers, and I walk over to a 60-year-old couple that in investor profiling, you would say investor. The lady covers her face and she runs away from Brian Coxford and the TV and says, no, I can't be on TV. And I later found out she called in sick to get in line. But what's really interesting about this investor profiling is this couple lives at 63rd and Marine, and they're going to sell their house and move into Marine Gateway, and they want to stay in the neighborhood. In fact, 23% of buyers at Marine Gateway came from the development's own postal code and adjacent postal code, and 37% of the buyers came from 6 neighboring postal codes. And the problem is that these buyers just do not bother to show up and balance out a 6 days of public hearing, similar to what a Rise Alliance went through and similar to what we had to go through in the rezoning of Marine Gateway. We asked what language is spoken most often in the household. 48% marked Cantonese or Mandarin. 28% of Greater Vancouver by population is Asian. 46% marked English. And 405 of our 414 buyers had BC driver's licenses and local banking. On buying habits, 75% of our buyers already own a home, a little higher than the 69% average of the last 6 years. 82% of our buyers do not live in condos. So in why bother building a brand? Well, when it comes to the developer, 71% said PCI was important or very important. And when it came to the marketer, the unaudited survey says 103% said Rennie. Or we could go with the audited version. 66% said the Rennie marketing systems was important or very important. The number one source that these buyers relied on was friends and family. The number one source that friends and family relied on, you may want to get out a pen, Don Forresgren, northeast corner of Marine and Cambie, Gino Noni, southwest corner, Marine and Cambie. 604-290-8009 is my cell phone. Because it's not a hobby, and how we get to friends and family, we have to keep that in the vault. We understand buying habits. Maybe we can start to understand product design. Also, as Vancouver and neighboring cities put their task forces together to create affordable home ownership models, I think we have to remember that the big barrier to entry in all of our affordability models, it's not the payments, it's the down payments. You can get two people to qualify, but you have to get the down payment. And think about it with banks tightening their lending criteria and oversight of pre-sale contracts. At Marine Gateway, we only allowed one sale per buyer. It's not the payments, again, it's the down payments. And will any financial institution offer construction financing of any scale to nothing down buyers or a development with a high percentage of 5% deposits and 5% down buyers? And the answer is no. The first-time buyer gets pushed out of the market by this tighter lending criteria. So where does the first-time buyer fit in with the pre-sale, given the breathtaking amount of pre-sales with 15 to 20% to 25% deposits? Well, the Marine Gateway number that really stood out to me was the 15% are getting their money from parents and grandparents, and the Marine Gateway average on deposits was 20%. So where are they getting the money? And we looked at a good sampling of buyers' deposits from 13 recent pre-sale developments, and I think I should tell you the names of the developments so you can understand that we didn't just do a Vancouver-centric survey. From 13 recent pre-sale developments representing 3,925 sales, and to understand these 3,925 sales, whether they have 5 or 10% deposits, we went to Terry Huey's Park Place in Surrey and Terry's Met in Burnaby. We also included Peter Redekop's Varsity in Langley, Intercorp's Metro and Silver in Burnaby, Peter Wall's 2300 Kingsway and Wall Centre Falls Creek, Colin Bose's Lido on Main Street and Sovereign in Burnaby, and Nabeeb Ferris's Kits 360, and PCI's Marine Gateway. And of the 3,925 homes, 82 had 5% deposits, or 2%, and 81 had 10% deposits, or 2%. And if you remove the Varsity in Langley and Terry Huey's Park Place in Surrey, only 14 had 5% deposits, or 1/3 of 1%. So if pre-sales really do include first-time buyers, as we all tell the media that they do, are the baby boomers, mom, dad, and grandparents becoming the real source of funds? I believe that the baby boomer and their parents are now so risk-adverse that they're taking money off the table and consolidating, and the first-time buyer is the benefactor of this aging demographic. And I wanted to apply some reality to my theory, so I called my friends Andy Ramlow and Ryan Berlin over at Urban Futures, because they are the smartest people I know, sober. That's a dig at David Baxter. And in case you missed it, Andy and Ryan do all of my population and census gathering year after year. Andy and Ryan's challenge was to find out for me the value of clear title primary residences owned by the 54 to 74-year-old. I wanted to try and figure out that older demographic of how much equity they really have in their homes, because given the aging baby boomer and how risk adverse they are, I'm trying to build a case that they're going to start selling, and they're going to start selling to maintain their lifestyles, and they're going to start selling to help their children. But when I received the data, I wanted to call Maureen and retitle today's talk and have t-shirts made up that say, "Mom and Dad bought a home in 1978, and all I got was a lousy one-bedroom condo," and in brackets, "so did my sister." Seriously, because in Vancouver, there is $88 billion, and this is just mind-boggling to me, but there's $88 billion in clear title homes and condominiums, primary residences, currently owned by 55 to 74-year-olds. This $88 billion represents 113,000 primary dwellings with an average value of $777,000. And not only is the $88 billion breathtaking, it also represents, and I think this is important too, a 33% increase since 2006. In 2006, the $88 billion was $66 billion, and in 2006, it was $586,000 average as opposed to $777,000. So you've got the oldest end of the baby boomer and their parents that are starting to look at a huge equity gain on top of aging, and they're going to be making changes in their life anyways. So as this $88 billion in equities, $88 billion equity, it also doesn't include if you had a 10% mortgage or you owed $10,000 left owing on your home, and it also doesn't include the $36 billion in equity owned by 45 to 54-year-olds. So a very safe assumption is the equity will be freed up over the next 15 years because my 55 to 74-year-olds will then be 50 to 89 years old, and the $88 billion has to be freed up to maintain unsustainable lifestyles and then to help the kids. I told you at the beginning that today was partly public therapy. Well, I'm 55, hence 55 to 74 years old, and the 15 years, that's when I intend to quit drinking coffee. More fundamentals, we really know that 69% of sales are to existing property owners, but now we have to consider since 1976, over 70% of those 69% have always bought a more expensive home than they left behind. And I would say that that trend of upgrading will drop every year for the next 15 years, and over the next 15 years we will see this $88 billion in equity split out somewhere between a transfer of wealth, buying a new home that is a buy down, and also largely to maintain a lifestyle that one has become accustomed to. I believe that this room's success will be to understand what this risk-adverse buy-down baby boomer will purchase next. It is becoming very obvious that Vancouver and Greater Vancouver real estate is really equity-driven, predominantly trading dollars more than being solely reliant on local incomes like a lot of other cities. Yet all the sound bites when it comes to the topic of affordability and home ownership are income-based. Incomes are a factor, but the way we talk about incomes should change. Seriously, and all of the Greater Vancouver sales activity was just, if all of the Greater Vancouver sales activity was just about incomes, we would have this meeting at Denny's. The fundamentals of the Greater Vancouver marketplace cannot be captured, as I said earlier, in an elevator conversation. So continuing this year where I started last year with data provided by Darren Nielsen, Rudy Nielsen's son over at Landcor, I think that this data will prove out